The Art of Showing Up Every Day. Written and published by Audiobook. Some days, the hardest thing to do is simply show up. Not in a grand, heroic way, but quietly, consistently, even when no one is watching. This book is about that quiet courage, the discipline of presence, the art of returning to yourself, again and again, no matter how loud the world gets, or how silent your spirit feels. The art of showing up every day isn't about motivation. It's about devotion. To your growth. To your peace. To your purpose. It's for the moments when you feel invisible. When the alarm clock rings and your heart feels heavy. When you've failed 3 times in a row and can't see the point of trying again. When your dreams feel like they belong to someone stronger, more disciplined, more deserving. But here's the truth. You don't need to be perfect to change your life. You just need to be present. Every day. Even in the smallest way. In these pages, we'll walk through the psychological patterns that hold you back. We'll explore real stories of people who rose, not by leaps, but by steps. And we'll unlock the emotional core of what it means to be reliable, first to yourself, then to the world. You'll discover how small commitments rewire your brain. How habits anchor you when motivation fades. How discipline becomes compassion. And how showing up becomes a sacred form of self-respect. Because when you show up, your life begins to shift. Your story begins to change. So, let me ask you something. What would your life look like if you just kept showing up? Chapter 1. The Weight of the Morning. Have you ever woken up with a weight on your chest? And you didn't know why? Not the kind you can trace to a bad dream or a missed deadline. But the kind that just lingers. Heavy. Quiet. Unexplained. I remember a morning like that. The sun was pouring through the blinds, golden and warm, but I felt nothing. Just the ache. Like something in me didn't want to rise. Not because I was tired, but because I didn't believe anything would change. That's the battle most people never talk about. The emotional resistance that greets you before the world does. The part of you that wonders, what's the point? Let's pause for a moment. Because maybe this isn't just about mornings. Maybe it's about everything. Showing up every day begins in that space. Not in ambition. Not in productivity. But in the quiet choice to meet yourself, even when it hurts. The psychology of resistance. Psychologists call it emotional inertia. The tendency to stay stuck because movement feels unsafe. It's not laziness. It's not weakness. It's the mind protecting itself from perceived failure or pain. And yet, it keeps us in cycles we desperately want to escape. Dr. Stephen Hayes, the founder of acceptance and commitment therapy, says something powerful. The pain is not the enemy. It's the avoidance of pain that traps us. When we avoid showing up, when we press snooze not just on alarms, but on life, we're not avoiding effort. We're avoiding emotion, disappointment, shame, fear of insignificance. But the moment we name it, something changes. Because when emotion is met with compassion instead of judgment, it softens. And that's the first step. The story of Alex. Let me tell you about Alex. He was a software developer in his mid-30s, smart and capable. But burnout hit him hard. At first, it was just fatigue. Then procrastination. Then, silence. He started sleeping through meetings. Stopped answering texts. Not because he didn't care, but because every little action felt like lifting a mountain. He said to me once, I didn't feel depressed. I just didn't feel motivated. I kept waiting for the feeling to come back. But motivation never came. At least not the way he expected. One day, after missing another deadline, he stood in the bathroom, staring at his reflection. And he asked himself a question he'd never asked before. What if I stop waiting to feel ready, and just do one thing today? That day, he didn't try to catch up on all his projects. He didn't write a to-do list. He didn't read a productivity book. He just made his bed. That was it. But it changed everything. Because for the first time in months, he kept a promise to himself. The science of tiny commitments. That moment may sound small, but in neuroscience, it's huge. Every time you follow through on a small commitment, your brain releases dopamine, not just as a reward, but as reinforcement. It says, you can trust yourself. Dr. B.J. Fogg at Stanford calls this the tiny habits approach. You don't build a life by overhauling it. You build it by stacking small, reliable actions. One brick at a time. And here's the best part. Consistency rewires your identity. Not just how you act, but who you believe you are. Before we go on, if this story is opening your eyes, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the channel. It helps us reach more souls just like yours. The mirror test. Here's something I want you to try tomorrow morning. Before checking your phone. Before brushing your teeth. Before you let the world speak to you. Go to the mirror. Look yourself in the eye. And say, out loud, I show up for you. Not for work. Not for your image. But for you. It'll feel weird at first. But do it anyway. Because it's not about the words. It's about the message. You are someone worth showing up for. Breaking the shame loop. Many people don't realize this. But the biggest obstacle to consistency isn't time. It's shame. Shame says, you didn't do it yesterday, so why bother today? Shame says, you always quit, so don't even try. And it wraps itself in logic that feels true. But shame is not truth. It's trauma wearing a suit. The way out is grace. Not indulgence. But compassion with structure. Say to yourself, yes, I missed yesterday, but today is still mine. That sentence alone has changed lives. The art of showing up every day isn't glamorous. It's not a movie montage with inspiring music. It's slow. It's gritty. It's deeply personal. But it's also the beginning of everything. Your habits. Your healing. Your confidence. Your story. So tomorrow morning, when the weight presses down, don't wait for motivation. Just sit up. Put your feet on the ground. And whisper to yourself, I'm here. That's enough. And from that place, everything begins again. Chapter 2. The Invisible Battle. There's a war happening inside people. And most of the time, no one else sees it. Not their friends. Not their co-workers. Sometimes, not even their family. It's the war between who they are and who they think they should be. The moment the alarm clock rings, it begins. You wake up not just to a new day, but to an old weight. A quiet pressure to catch up. To be more. Do more. Prove something. To whom? That's the part we rarely ask. For many, showing up every day feels like pushing against something invisible. Something that never quite gives. The story of Maria. Maria was a teacher. Loved her students. Worked late hours. Smiled often. To anyone watching, she had it together. But what no one saw was how every morning, she sat in her car 10 minutes before going inside, crying. Not because she hated her job. Not because something was wrong. But because she was exhausted from pretending she wasn't struggling. She told herself she had no right to feel overwhelmed. After all, she had a job. She had a family. She was fine. But fine doesn't mean fulfilled. Fine doesn't mean at peace. And what broke her wasn't the work. It was the inner dialogue that never stopped. You're not doing enough. You're falling behind. If you were stronger, you wouldn't feel this way. Let me ask you something. Have you ever spoken to yourself that way? If you have, you're not alone. That voice isn't yours. It's a pattern. A residue. A script written long ago, by pressure, by perfectionism, by pain. Where that voice comes from. Psychologists call it inner critical dialogue. And here's what's important. You weren't born with it. It was learned. Often in childhood. From unmet expectations. From needing approval. From being praised only when you achieved. Over time, love became conditional. And the message your nervous system absorbed was clear. If I'm not performing, I'm not worthy. So now, even as an adult, rest feels like laziness. Joy feels unearned. And showing up feels like a performance. But it doesn't have to be that way. The power of internal redirection. One of the most powerful things you can do is catch that inner voice in the act, and interrupt it. Not by arguing, not by fighting, but by gently saying, I hear you, but I'm choosing something else today. Because showing up isn't about silencing that voice. It's about not letting it drive. One small moment of internal redirection rewires the brain. You move from reactive to intentional, from shame-based to choice-based behavior. And every time you do that, your sense of self becomes sturdier. Rewriting the script. Let's pause for a moment. If the voice in your head had a name, what would it be? Maybe it sounds like a parent, a coach, an old boss, a former partner. Maybe it sounds like you, on your worst day. The next time it shows up, try this. Name it. Thank it for trying to protect you. Then take your power back. Say something like, I know you're trying to keep me safe, but I don't need that story anymore. And then, take one small action forward. That action doesn't have to be big. It can be as simple as getting out of bed, washing your face, drinking a glass of water, opening the curtains. Because every action that comes from choice, no matter how small, builds internal trust. And trust is the foundation of consistency. The story of Julian. Julian was a young entrepreneur. On paper, he was successful. But behind the scenes, he was stuck in a pattern. He would start projects with passion, then abandon them halfway through. He thought it was procrastination, thought it was laziness. But when he finally saw a therapist, he realized it was fear. Not fear of failure, but fear of what success would require. Because if I succeed, he told me, I'll have to maintain it. And what if I can't? That fear kept him small, kept him starting over again and again. Because starting over felt safer than staying in something he might outgrow. So his therapist gave him a mantra. Just one line. Consistency is not a prison. It's a promise. A promise to show up. Not perfectly, not always boldly, but reliably. Julian started using it every day. Whenever he wanted to quit, he repeated it. And slowly, the fear softened. Not because it disappeared, but because he stopped making decisions from it. A moment of pause. Before we go further, if this chapter is helping you recognize something in your own life, take a moment now to support the channel. Like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need this message today. Let's keep building this space for growth, together. The truth about progress. Progress isn't loud. It doesn't always feel exciting. It often looks like repetition. Like doing the same thing you did yesterday, with just a little more presence. You brush your teeth. You eat a real meal. You stretch your back. You answer one email. You take a breath before responding. It may not feel like transformation, but it is. Because the real change isn't in the task. It's in the relationship you have with yourself while doing it. You stop abandoning yourself and start walking with yourself. That's what showing up is. One final thought. You don't need to win the day. You don't need to crush it. You don't need to be inspiring. You just need to be honest. To listen. To try. To return. Because the most powerful act of self-care is your presence. And the most courageous thing you can do is keep showing up anyway. Chapter 3. The Lie of the Big Breakthrough. We've all been told the story. One moment. One turning point. One breakthrough that changes everything. It's in the movies. The self-help books. The success podcasts. The day everything clicks. The morning they just knew. The night it all turned around. But here's the truth. That story is a lie. Breakthroughs don't usually come like lightning. They come like water, slow, steady, carving through resistance over time. The people who change their lives in one dramatic instant, they've usually been building toward that moment for years. In silence, in frustration, in failure, in showing up when it felt pointless. The story of Donnell. Donnell was a recovering addict. He'd been in and out of rehab for most of his 20s. Smart, sensitive, but stuck in a loop of relapse and regret. He once told me something I never forgot. Everyone talks about the day I got clean, but no one talks about the 19 times I didn't. He had tried everything, programs, sponsors, detox centers. But what finally changed him wasn't a moment of power. It was a moment of honesty. One day, he sat on the sidewalk outside a shelter, trembling. He had $20 in his pocket. He could buy food. Or he could buy a high. He said, "That day, I didn't feel strong. I felt tired. Too tired to lie to myself again." So he walked back into the shelter. That wasn't the day he became a different person. That was the day he stopped pretending he had to. And from that tired, honest place, he started over. The psychology of consistent identity. In psychology, there's a term called self-concept consistency. It's the way we construct our identity based on repeated patterns. When you see yourself quitting over and over, you start to believe, "I'm just not disciplined." When you show up late again and again, the mind concludes, "I'm not reliable." And that becomes the story you live by, even when it's no longer true. But every consistent action, no matter how small, challenges that story. You show up to the gym, even for 10 minutes. You return one message instead of ghosting everyone. You clean your desk. You say no to something toxic. And your brain takes note. It starts writing a new sentence. Maybe I'm someone who keeps going. That's where transformation really begins. Not in inspiration, but in repetition. Let's pause for a moment. Maybe you've been chasing that one big breakthrough. Waiting for the right mindset. The perfect day. The ideal energy. But let me ask you something. What if that moment is already here? And what if it doesn't feel like lightning, but like brushing your teeth? Making your bed? Opening your laptop? What if the quiet thing you're doing today is the thing that changes everything? The story of Lucia. Lucia was a single mom with 2 kids and a full-time job. No time for herself. No space to breathe. She kept telling herself she'd start meditating once her schedule lightened. She'd exercise when the kids were older. She'd write her book when life got less chaotic. One day, in the middle of a messy living room, she stopped. Sat on the floor. Closed her eyes for 60 seconds. That was it. 1 minute. No music. No ritual. Just silence. It didn't feel life-changing. But something shifted. The next day, she did it again. And again. 60 seconds. That's all. Within a month, she had built a habit. Not because she had more time, but because she stopped waiting for perfect conditions. Lucia's story reminds us. Momentum doesn't begin when the world gets quiet. It begins when you stop making excuses and start doing something. The myth of readiness. You may be wondering, but what if I'm not ready? That's the trick of the brain. It confuses readiness with comfort. But they're not the same. Most people who make real change aren't ready. They're just willing. Willing to try. To mess up. To come back tomorrow and try again. Showing up is not a declaration of power. It's a whisper of willingness, support and reflection. Before we continue, if this message is helping you shift something inside, take a moment to support the channel. Like it. Share it. It may be the very thing someone else needs to hear today. Reclaiming the narrative. The most dangerous thing about the big breakthrough myth is that it keeps you passive. It says, wait for it. Wait for the book. Wait for the mentor. Wait for the inspiration. But your life is not a waiting room. It's a canvas. And no one is coming to pick up the brush but you. You don't need an epiphany. You need a pattern. A rhythm. A routine that makes space for your becoming. So instead of asking, when will it all make sense? Ask, what can I do with what I have, right now? That's the doorway. That's the shift. That's the art of showing up. One last note. You may not feel powerful today. You may not feel ready. But if you've shown up, just by listening to this, you've already taken the most important step. Keep doing it. Even when it's boring. Even when it's hard. Even when no one notices. Because every time you do, you're creating the life you thought only existed on the other side of a breakthrough. You're living it. Right now. Chapter 4. The Discipline of the Ordinary. We chase peaks. Highlights. Extraordinary moments. But life isn't made of highlights. It's made of Mondays. It's made of traffic. It's made of doing the same thing again, and again, and again. That's why the people who master consistency aren't chasing motivation. They're embracing the ordinary. Because the truth is, the ordinary is where your future is built. The boredom barrier. Let's be honest. Discipline gets boring. The gym loses its thrill. The new routine becomes routine. The excitement wears off. And then what? Most people quit here. Not because it's too hard, but because it's not exciting anymore. This is what James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, calls the plateau of latent potential. It's the stretch of time where nothing seems to be working. You're putting in the effort, but not seeing results. No applause. No breakthroughs. Just repetition. But beneath the surface, change is happening. Like a seed buried in soil. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not growing. This is the moment that separates those who wish from those who build. The story of Marcus. Marcus was a musician. Not famous. Not viral. Every morning, he woke up at 6 a.m. and played for an hour. Before work. Before the world. Not because he had a concert coming up, but because he had a promise to keep. With himself. He once said to me, "I stopped measuring my progress by praise. I measure it by presence." That hit me. Because the real reward isn't recognition. It's becoming someone who shows up, no matter what. Let's pause for a moment. What's the thing in your life that's become ordinary? The gym? Your job? That small act of self-care? What if you stopped looking for it to feel amazing, and started honoring it as the groundwork of your evolution? The ordinary is not the enemy. It's the arena. The illusion of motivation. Here's something few people admit. Motivation is deeply unreliable. It's a state, not a strategy. It comes and goes based on energy, emotion, even the weather. That's why the most consistent people don't rely on motivation. They rely on systems. They create triggers. They build habits. They set up routines that reduce the need for willpower. They don't wait until they feel like it. They act because it's what they do. The psychology of identity-based habits. Here's something powerful. Your brain wants to act in alignment with your identity. So when you begin to say, "I'm someone who works out," or "I'm someone who meditates," your mind looks for evidence to confirm that. The more often you act like that person, especially when it's boring or hard, the stronger that identity becomes. That's how transformation works. From the inside out. Not by pressure, but by pattern. The story of Anita. Anita was a writer. But for years, she never called herself that. Why? Because she only wrote when she felt inspired. Which wasn't often. Then one day, she heard a quote. Amateurs wait for inspiration. Professionals show up. That hit her. Because she wasn't trying to be famous. She was trying to be honest. So she made a commitment. 250 words a day. That's it. Not a book. Not a masterpiece. Just 250 words. Most days, it was nonsense. But every day, she sat down. 3 years later, she had her first published novel. Not because of talent, but because she kept writing, even when it wasn't thrilling. Before we go on, if this chapter is speaking to your spirit, take a second to like and subscribe to the channel. Share this with someone who's been quietly showing up too. We see you. You matter. Reshaping the ordinary. The ordinary isn't what holds you back. It's what holds you together. Cooking the same breakfast. Walking the same block. Reading one page at night. It doesn't look like transformation, but it is. Because the ordinary moments. That's where your character is formed. Where discipline is practiced. Where peace is found. It's in the moments no one claps for. The ones you'll never post about. The ones that slowly build the life you said you wanted. The ritual of showing up. Try this. Pick one small thing you can do every day, without fanfare. Brushing your teeth with presence. Making your bed with intention. Stretching for 5 minutes. Make it your anchor. Not because it's impressive, but because it's yours. And as you do it, Remind yourself. This is who I am now. Not perfect. Not productive. But present. Final thought. You don't need to reinvent your life today. You just need to respect the rituals that seem small. Because over time, they won't be. They'll become your foundation. Your rhythm. Your evidence. That you're not waiting for life to happen. You're building it. Brick by boring brick. And that is the art of showing up. Chapter 5. When no one claps. There's a certain kind of silence that hurts more than criticism. It's the silence that comes after effort. When you give your all, and no one notices. No applause. No congratulations. No validation. Just quiet. That's where most people quit. Not because they're weak, but because they were told that effort equals reward. And when that reward doesn't show up, we question the point of trying. But let me tell you the truth. The moments that define you the most are the ones you walk through with no witnesses. The story of Kevin. Kevin was a small business owner. During the pandemic, he lost 80% of his income. But he kept the doors open. Barely. He said, I was showing up every day for customers who didn't come. Every morning, he unlocked the store, cleaned the counter, restocked the shelves. It felt pointless. But it was his ritual. His way of saying, I'm still here. A year later, things slowly turned. Not overnight. Not all at once. But day by day. And when someone finally said, it's great you made it through, Kevin smiled and said, no one saw the days I wanted to give up. That's what showing up looks like. It's not always strong. It's not always visible. But it's always powerful. The expectation loop. So many of us tie our effort to recognition. We do something good and expect someone to clap, to cheer, to validate our progress. But that's a dangerous pattern. Because the moment you stop getting praise, you stop trying. Not because you don't care, but because you weren't doing it for you. And that's when you lose control of your own growth. True transformation doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't need applause. It just needs presence. Let's pause for a moment. If you've ever felt unseen, if you've worked hard in silence, if you've kept going without anyone saying, well done, this chapter is for you. Not everyone will understand your journey. Not everyone needs to. Because growth is not a performance. It's a process. The psychology of internal validation. Internal validation is the ability to feel good about yourself, regardless of external feedback. And it's one of the hardest things to develop. Because from childhood, we're conditioned to seek approval. Smiles for good behavior. Stars for good grades. Likes for good photos. But at some point, you have to build something deeper. You have to become your own witness. Your own source of encouragement. Your own reason to keep going. That's what makes your progress sustainable. The story of Nina. Nina was trying to lose weight. Not for looks, but for health. She worked out 5 times a week. Changed her diet. Drank more water. After 3 months, nothing changed on the scale. She was devastated. Why am I even doing this? She asked. Nothing's happening. But her trainer said something powerful. The mirror doesn't show what you're building inside. And it clicked. Nina had been building discipline, resilience, habits. The results weren't visible yet, but they were real. So she kept going. And 3 months later, the change finally showed. Not just on her body, but in her energy, her mood, her mindset. Support this space. If you're finding value in these stories, support the channel by liking and subscribing. Share it with someone who might be walking through their own quiet season. Let's remind each other, growth isn't always loud. The loneliness of growth. Here's something people don't talk about enough. Growth can be lonely. Not because people don't love you, but because they don't always understand what you're doing. You're breaking patterns they've accepted. Setting boundaries they're not used to. Choosing healing when others choose distraction. And that can feel isolating. But it's also sacred. Because the deeper your growth becomes, the quieter it often is. You don't have to explain yourself. You just have to keep going. The power of private victories. Stephen Covey once said, "Private victories precede public victories." That means the things you do when no one is watching. Those are the ones that shape you the most. The early mornings. The quiet journaling. The moment you choose water over wine. The decision to walk away instead of react. These don't get celebrated, but they change you. And eventually, the world catches up. They see the results. They admire your strength. But by then, you've already become the person you needed. A gentle reminder. You're not behind. You're not failing. You're just growing in silence. And silence isn't empty. It's full of becoming. Keep showing up, especially when no one claps. Because that's the part of the story that no one tells. But everyone respects. Chapter 6. The day you don't feel like it. Let's talk about the hardest day. Not the day everything goes wrong. Not the day life falls apart. But the day when nothing is wrong. And you still don't want to try. That's the most dangerous kind of day. Because it's quiet. It doesn't look like a breakdown. But something inside just shuts down. You don't feel sad. You don't feel anxious. You just feel disconnected. And that's the day most people disappear from their own life. The slow fade. It doesn't happen overnight. It starts with little things. You skip your morning walk. You leave a text unread. You avoid the mirror. You cancel plans. Not because you're in crisis, but because showing up feels pointless. That's how the slow fade begins. You don't crash, you coast. Emotionally numb. Mentally checked out. You go through the motions, but none of it feels real. The story of Elise. Elise was a college student. Bright. Motivated. Loved learning. But during her second year, something shifted. She stopped raising her hand in class. Stopped calling home. Stopped caring about her grades. Her friends said, "You seem off." She smiled. Shrugged. Just tired. But it wasn't just tired. It was the slow fade. When she finally opened up to a counselor, she said, "I don't feel bad. I just don't feel anything." The counselor nodded. "That's not nothing," they said. "That's emotional exhaustion." The science of emotional depletion. When your brain is constantly trying to keep you functioning, especially under pressure or perfectionism, it drains your emotional energy. And over time, this leads to emotional burnout. A state where your feelings flatten. Your interest fades. Your internal spark dims. It's not laziness. It's survival. And the key to breaking it isn't doing more. It's reconnecting with what matters. Tiny acts of aliveness. If today feels like that day, the day you don't feel like it, here's the most powerful thing you can do. Don't fix everything. Don't overhaul your life. Just do one thing that reminds you you're alive. Open the window. Feel the breeze. Drink water slowly. Move your body gently. And if that's too much, just whisper to yourself, "I'm still here." Because aliveness doesn't return through pressure. It returns through presence. Let's pause for a moment. If you're listening right now and this chapter feels like it was written for you, that's not an accident. Take a moment to like this message, share it, subscribe. Someone else out there is feeling the same quiet heaviness you are. You're not alone. The lie of not feeling like it. Here's something to understand. You don't feel like it is a feeling, but it's not the whole truth. The truth is, you are tired. You are discouraged. You do feel stuck. But action can shift your state if it's done with care. The goal isn't to be productive. It's to be engaged. To reconnect with something, anything, that brings you back into your body. Back into your now. The story of Lewis. Lewis was in his 40s. Divorced. Lonely. Stuck in a job he hated. Most nights, he came home and sat in silence. Didn't cook. Didn't clean. Didn't speak. One night, he saw an old guitar in the corner. Hadn't touched it in years. He picked it up. Strummed a few chords. Terrible ones. But for the first time in weeks, he felt something. Not joy. Not hope. Just a flicker. That was enough. He began playing 10 minutes a day. Then 20. Then he joined a music group. He didn't fix his life overnight, but he found a lifeline. When you want to quit, some days, the bravest thing you'll do is not give up. Even if all you do is survive. If you show up tired, it still counts. If you show up sad, it still counts. If you show up imperfect, it still counts. Because showing up isn't about how you feel. It's about what you choose. And every time you choose presence over escape, you build resilience. You build trust. You remind your nervous system that it's safe to stay. One gentle invitation. If today is heavy, if you don't feel like doing anything, do this. Breathe in. Say silently, this moment is mine. Breathe out. And just be here. Then take one small action, no matter how small. Wash your hands. Step outside. Put your phone down. Stretch. Don't wait for energy. Create momentum through kindness. You're still here. You made it to this sentence. That means you showed up today. Even when it was hard. Even when it didn't feel worth it. That matters. Because the day you don't feel like it is the day your presence becomes the most powerful act of courage. You don't have to do it all. Just don't disappear. Not from your dreams. Not from your healing. Not from yourself. You're still here. And that's enough. Chapter 7. The Storm That Teaches You. Some lessons don't come gently. They come like storms. Sudden. Unwelcome. Loud. They shake the life you knew. Rattle your expectations. Flood your plans. And at first, it feels like destruction. But if you stay through the chaos, if you don't run, you start to realize. The storm wasn't there to break you. It was there to clear what no longer served you. The collapse before the shift. For most people, change doesn't begin with clarity. It begins with collapse. A relationship ends. A job disappears. A health scare forces you to slow down. You're left in the aftermath, trying to make sense of what just happened. And it feels unfair, unkind, unlivable. But over time, something shifts. You begin to see the patterns that led you there. The red flags you ignored. The truths you buried. And in that space, messy, raw, unpolished, growth begins. Not because you planned it, but because pain made you pay attention. The story of Cameron. Cameron was a high achiever. Top of his class. Fast-tracked in his company. Checked every box society said would make him successful. But he was hollow inside. Didn't sleep. Didn't smile. Just performed. Until one morning, he couldn't get out of bed. Literally. His body shut down. Doctors called it burnout. But it felt more like his soul had finally said, enough. He was forced to take a leave of absence. And for the first time in his adult life, he had to ask a terrifying question. If I'm not achieving, who am I? He spent months in therapy, journaling, walking without headphones. And what he discovered wasn't a new goal. It was a new pace, a new voice, a new way of being. The storm broke him open, so that he could finally rebuild himself honestly. Let's pause for a moment. Maybe you're in the middle of your own storm. Maybe everything feels upside down. If so, take a breath. You're not doing something wrong. You're moving through something real. And no, you don't have to figure it out right now. You just have to feel it. Face it. Stay with yourself through it. The psychology of post-traumatic growth. Most people know about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. But fewer know about PTG, post-traumatic growth. It's the phenomenon where people, after surviving trauma, emerge with deeper wisdom, more empathy, clearer purpose, stronger values. And while no one wants trauma, some people transform through it. Not because pain is magical, but because pain strips away the noise. It forces you to ask the questions you've been avoiding. Who am I without the title? What do I really want? What am I no longer willing to carry? Those are the questions that rebuild you. The story of Tsara. Tsara lost her father suddenly. He was her anchor, her mentor, her person. For months, she was numb. Couldn't concentrate. Couldn't care about anything. She stopped creating. Stopped talking. But she kept doing one thing, writing letters to him. Every night. Unsent. Just thoughts on paper. It didn't fix the grief, but it gave her a place to meet it. A year later, she turned those letters into a book. Not to sell. Just to honor what was lost and what was found. Because in losing him, she found her voice. Before we go on, if this chapter is helping you weather something in your own life, take a second to support the channel. Like, subscribe, share it with someone in the middle of their own storm. Let's remind each other, we don't have to go through it alone. Rebuilding from rubble. After a storm, the rebuilding is slow. You don't start with skyscrapers. You start with soil, daily routines, drinking water, making a list, going outside. That's what showing up looks like during recovery. Not leaping forward, but standing upright. Then walking again. Some days, you'll feel like nothing's changing. But healing isn't linear. It spirals. It deepens. It unfolds. And each day you stay with it. You build a little more trust with yourself. One final reflection. The storm didn't ask for your permission. But your healing does. It asks you to slow down. To be kind. To keep showing up for yourself, not in spite of what happened, but because of it. You are not broken. You are becoming. Not all at once. Not without pain. But with presence. With courage. With grace. So if the winds are still howling, stay anchored. Keep showing up. One breath at a time. Because this storm is not the end. It's the clearing before something new. Chapter 8. The commitment you make in the dark. There's a kind of commitment that doesn't begin with excitement. It doesn't come with fanfare or fresh start energy. It begins in the dark. Quiet. Uncertain. Alone. It's the kind you make when everything inside you wants to quit. When your vision is blurry. When your motivation has left the room. That's the moment when real commitment is born. Because promises made in the light are easy. But the ones made in the dark? Those are sacred. The story of Ray. Ray had lost his job. A layoff he didn't see coming. He had bills. Kids. A mortgage. He spent the first few days in shock. Then panic. Then shame. He applied for jobs. No one replied. His confidence crumbled. One night, sitting alone in the kitchen, he whispered to himself, "I have nothing left." And then, something quiet rose inside him. "I may have nothing left," he said, "but I can still get up tomorrow." That was it. No goal. No plan. Just a quiet commitment. Get up tomorrow. He kept that promise. And the next. And the next. A few weeks later, he got a call. An interview. A job. Not what he expected, but exactly what he needed. Years later, he told me, "The most important decision of my life was made in silence. At my lowest." The myth of clarity. We often wait for clarity before committing. We want to be sure, to feel ready, to see the path. But commitment isn't born from clarity. It creates clarity. You move. You learn. You adjust. That's how the path reveals itself. Let's pause for a moment. Are you waiting for the right moment to begin? Are you hoping for certainty before you move? Here's something no one tells you. The right moment isn't coming. The certainty you want won't show up first. You go first. Your feet create the road. Your action shapes the map. The psychology of identity commitment. In behavioral psychology, there's a powerful principle. We become committed to the things we identify with. When you say, "I'm trying," you stay in motion. But when you say, "I'm someone who shows up," you anchor. You stop asking, "Will I?" and start asking, "How will I?" That shift matters. Because people don't follow through based on willpower. They follow through based on identity. And identity is shaped in the dark. In the silence. In the doing. The story of Hannah. Hannah had just left a toxic relationship. She didn't feel strong. Didn't feel proud. Just empty. Everyone around her kept saying, "You're so brave." But she didn't feel brave. She felt broken. Every night, She wrote one line in her journal. "I'm still here." That was her commitment. Not to heal overnight. Not to bounce back. Just to stay. To not run. To keep choosing herself. One night, she wrote a different line. "I don't feel like a survivor, but I'm acting like one." And that's when things began to shift. Before we go on, if you're finding comfort or courage in these words, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this chapter. Someone else might be sitting in the dark right now, needing a reminder that they're not alone. The everyday vow. What if every day you made a vow to yourself? Not a resolution. Not a perfect plan. Just a quiet promise. I will not abandon myself today. That's the essence of showing up. Not grand gestures. Not massive wins. Just presence. One act of self-respect at a time. Drink water with care. Stretch without rushing. Speak kindly to yourself once. Just once. That's enough. When the light returns. The beautiful thing about the dark? It doesn't last. The light returns. The clarity comes. The energy rebuilds. But when it does, you'll know something deeper. You didn't need the light to move forward. You moved anyway. And that's power. That's resilience. That's you, becoming unshakable. Final thought. So if tonight is heavy, if this season feels endless, just stay. That's your only job. Stay with yourself. Stay with the process. Stay with the breath. And in doing so, you make the most sacred commitment of all. To not give up on the person you're becoming. Chapter 9. The mirror isn't always honest. We look in the mirror and ask questions it can't answer. Am I enough? Am I behind? Do I matter? But here's the truth. The mirror only shows you what's on the surface. It can't reflect the days you didn't give up. The healing you're still working through. The promises you kept in silence. It can't show your growth. Not really. Because growth lives beneath the skin, where no reflection can reach. The problem with reflection. We live in a world obsessed with appearance. Before and after photos. Weight loss updates. Productivity charts. But transformation doesn't always look like progress. Sometimes it looks like slowing down. Setting boundaries. Saying no. None of that is visible. But it's all real. And if you judge yourself by what you can see, you'll always feel like you're falling short. The story of Jenna. Jenna was in recovery from an eating disorder. She was learning to eat without guilt. To move without punishing herself. She told me, the hardest part wasn't the food. It was the mirror. Every time she looked, she saw failure. Even when she was healing. She started covering mirrors. Not because she was ashamed, but because she was learning to feel her progress instead of see it. She journaled how she felt after meals. She tracked energy, not weight. Eventually, she uncovered the mirrors. Not because she looked different, but because she saw herself differently. The lie of visible progress. There's a lie we've been sold. If I can't see the change, it doesn't count. But here's what counts. The conversation you didn't avoid. The anger you softened. The night you cried and still showed up the next day. None of it fits into a before and after photo. But it's all proof that you're becoming. Let's pause for a moment. When's the last time you felt proud of yourself? Without anyone clapping. Not because something dramatic happened, but because you knew you acted from truth? If it's been a while, pause. Reflect. You've come further than you think. You've endured more than you share. And you're still here. That matters. The psychology of intrinsic worth. Psychology calls it intrinsic self-worth. It means you matter, no matter what you do. No matter what you accomplish. No matter how you look. But the world doesn't always teach that. We're praised for outcomes, not effort. For wins, not wisdom. For image, not integrity. So it becomes our job to unlearn that. To remember our worth is not earned. It's inherent. You don't have to prove your value. You just have to believe in it long enough to protect it. The story of Troy. Troy was rebuilding his life after addiction. He'd lost his job, his relationships, his sense of identity. One night at a recovery meeting, someone asked, "How do you keep going when you still hate what you see?" Troy paused and said, "I stopped looking in mirrors. I started listening to how I speak to myself." That was his turning point. He couldn't change how he looked overnight, but he could change how he spoke. And that changed everything. Before we go on, if this chapter is shifting how you see yourself, take a moment to like and share this message. There's someone out there still trapped in what the mirror says. Let's help them look deeper. The practice of seeing differently. Here's something to try. Next time you pass a mirror, pause. Don't fix anything. Don't critique. Just nod. Smile. Say, "Thank you for showing up." Because what matters most isn't what you look like in the mirror. It's who you are when no one's watching. And how gently you treat that person. The reflection you can trust. The mirror might lie, but your actions won't. Your effort won't. Your courage won't. That's the real reflection. How you show up. How you stay. How you speak to yourself on the days no one else does. That's who you are. Not your weight. Not your title. Not your image. Just you. Unfiltered. Unfinished. But deeply, beautifully real. Final thought. Next time the mirror makes you question your worth, look beyond it. Close your eyes. Feel your heartbeat. Remember your resilience. And whisper, "I am more than what I see." Because you are. And that truth, that quiet, unwavering truth, is why you must keep showing up. Chapter 10. The Loneliness of Self-Respect. Self-respect sounds noble. Empowering. Like something we should all want. But no one tells you how lonely it can feel. Because self-respect means saying no when everyone expects a yes. Walking away from people who don't value you. Setting boundaries that others don't like. And when you start choosing yourself, you might lose the version of you that kept everyone else comfortable. That's the part no one claps for. But it's the part that frees you. The hidden cost of growth. Growth isn't just about rising. It's about shedding. You shed habits, environments, and sometimes, people. Especially the ones who only loved the version of you who overgave, over-apologized, or stayed silent. As you begin to honor yourself, some relationships shift. Some disappear. And at first, it feels like loss. But often, it's liberation in disguise. The story of Malika. Malika was a caregiver. Always the fixer. Always the listener. Always the one who put herself last. It made her feel useful, needed, loved. Until one day, her body said no. Chronic fatigue. Anxiety. Burnout. She went to therapy, expecting tools to manage stress. Instead, her therapist said, "You're not tired because you're busy. You're tired because you're living out of alignment." That hit her hard. So she made changes. Started saying no. Started resting. Stopped chasing approval. And people noticed. But not always kindly. "You've changed," some said. "You're distant. You're selfish." At first, it broke her heart. But then she realized. She hadn't changed. She'd returned to herself. Let's pause for a moment. Have you ever felt guilty for honoring your own needs? For choosing peace over people-pleasing? That's the ache of reclaiming yourself. Because when you build boundaries, you may lose comfort. But you gain clarity. And clarity is worth the cost. The psychology of boundary guilt. Psychologists say that guilt often follows boundaries. Not because we're doing something wrong, but because we've been conditioned to believe love equals sacrifice. But real love, healthy love, includes self. If you disappear inside your relationships, you're not being loyal. You're being lost. Self-respect doesn't mean you don't care. It means you finally care about you. 2. The story of Isaac. Isaac was always the yes guy. Extra shifts. Late night help. Always available. People loved him for it. But no one noticed when he was overwhelmed. When his chest tightened in meetings. When he stopped sleeping. One evening, his daughter asked, "Daddy, why are you always tired?" That was his breaking point. He started small. turned off his phone after 6 p.m., said no to weekend overtime. It was awkward, uncomfortable. Some people got mad. But his daughter started saying something new. "Daddy, you're fun again." And that was everything. Before we go on, if this chapter is helping you feel seen in your quiet decisions, take a second to support this space. Like, subscribe, share. There's someone else out there learning to choose themselves. 2. Being alone versus being aligned. Self-respect may cost you company, but it buys you alignment. And there's a big difference between being alone and being at peace. When you stop betraying yourself for belonging, you start finding the kind of connection that doesn't ask you to shrink. You attract people who see you, support you, respect your no as much as your yes. That's not loneliness. That's sacred space. One gentle reminder. If your boundaries make someone angry, that doesn't mean you were wrong. It just means they were benefiting from your lack of them. Hold the line. Stay the course. Protect your peace. Even when it's quiet. Even when it hurts. Because every time you choose self-respect, you teach yourself that your needs matter. And that lesson? That's how you learn to stay. Final thought. You might walk alone for a while. You might grieve old versions of yourself. You might miss the ease of saying yes. But what you'll find in that space is your truth. Not the role you played. Not the mask you wore, but the core of who you are. And that's someone worth showing up for. Every day. Chapter 11. When progress looks like standing still. Not every step forward looks like movement. Sometimes progress feels like stillness. Like resting. Like breathing through a moment you would have once escaped. It feels uneventful. Unproductive. Invisible. But stillness can be sacred. Because the deepest shifts often happen when the world sees nothing changing, and yet you know better. The addiction to constant motion. We live in a culture obsessed with progress. More steps, more goals, more hustle. Rest is often mistaken for weakness. Pausing is seen as falling behind. But let's be honest. That kind of constant motion? It's often just fear in disguise. Fear of feeling. Fear of missing out. Fear of what will rise when we slow down long enough to listen. So we fill every space with doing. Until we forget how to just be. The story of Naomi. Naomi was in the middle of a career pivot. She'd left a toxic job. She didn't have the next thing lined up. And every day, she woke up anxious. Not because she regretted leaving, but because she didn't know how to exist without a title. So she filled her time with job boards. Networking events. Courses she didn't even enjoy. Until one day, her therapist said, "What if your progress isn't about doing more, but allowing more?" Naomi didn't know what that meant. So she tried an experiment. She stopped forcing the search. Took walks. Sat with the discomfort of not having answers. And slowly, a different voice emerged. Not the frantic one that said, "You're wasting time." But the quiet one that asked, "What do you want?" That was the beginning of a real shift. Not just in her career, but in her entire life. Let's pause for a moment. What if the stillness you're resisting is the exact thing trying to save you? What if growth is asking you to slow down so it can catch up? What if standing still isn't losing ground, but finally finding your ground? The psychology of integration. In psychology, there's a concept called integration. It's what happens when your mind begins to process new truths. But here's the catch. Integration doesn't happen while you're racing. It happens in the pause. It's not when you read the book. It's when the book starts living inside you. Not when you set the goal, but when the goal begins to transform how you see yourself. And for that to happen, you need space, stillness, silence. The story of Matteo. Matteo had been in therapy for 6 months. He'd been learning, processing, writing everything down. But nothing felt different. No big change. No breakthroughs. Until one day, a friend asked him a question that would have triggered him a year ago. And he didn't react. He paused, breathed, responded with calm. That night, he realized. This is what healing looks like. Not dramatic, just different. It was the progress no one else could see. But he could feel it. Before we go on, if this message is helping you feel seen in your slower season, take a moment to share it. Like, subscribe. There are others silently healing, wondering if it counts. Let's remind them, it does. The pressure to perform progress. Sometimes we rush to post updates. Not because we're proud, but because we're insecure. We want to prove we're not stuck, that we're doing something. But healing doesn't owe anyone proof. Neither does self-discovery or peace. It's okay if no one sees the shift. You're the one who has to live it. And you're the only one who needs to know it's real. A practice of gentle presence. Try this for 1 week. At the end of each day, instead of asking, what did I achieve? Ask, how did I show up for myself today? Maybe you breathed through a craving. Maybe you paused before saying something hurtful. Maybe you chose silence instead of self-judgment. That counts. Every one of those moments is progress. Every one of those choices is power. Final thought. Stillness isn't laziness. It's listening. It's trusting. It's allowing something deeper to unfold. So if today looks like nothing changed, look again. You're softer, wiser, more present. And maybe, just maybe, that's the kind of progress that lasts. Chapter 12. The break you thought you didn't deserve. There's a moment we all face. When exhaustion creeps in, and we still whisper, but I haven't earned a break. You keep pushing. Keep saying yes. Keep showing up for everything, except yourself. Because somewhere along the way, you started to believe that rest is a reward. And you haven't done enough to deserve it. That's the lie. Because rest isn't something you earn. It's something you require. The cycle of self-neglect. It often begins subtly. Skipping lunch to get more done. Working through weekends. Saying I'm fine when you're clearly not. At first, it feels productive. Responsible. Strong. But slowly, you start to disappear inside your own life. You don't remember the last time you felt joy. The last time you laughed without guilt. The last time you woke up and didn't feel behind. This isn't just business. It's self-abandonment. And the only way back is through rest. The story of Damien. Damien was the kind of guy everyone relied on. He was the rock. The steady one. Always available. Until one day, he blacked out at work. Stress-induced. Completely burned out. The doctors told him to rest. But he didn't know how. He kept saying, I don't have time to rest. What he really meant was, I don't know who I am without doing. That's what scared him the most. So his therapist gave him a task. Take 1 full day off. No productivity. No to-do list. Just rest. He resisted. Fought it. Felt ashamed. But he did it. And by the end of that day, he realized, I didn't just need rest. I needed permission. From himself. Let's pause for a moment. When was the last time you gave yourself a real break? Not just time off from work, but time with yourself. Time to slow down. To breathe. To remember you're a human being, not a machine. If it's been too long, let this chapter be your permission. The biology of burnout. Burnout isn't just mental. It's physiological. When you push your nervous system without pause, you trigger a constant stress response. Cortisol stays high. Inflammation rises. Your immune system weakens. And emotionally, you feel numb, irritable, disconnected. Rest isn't laziness. It's how your body resets. It's how your mind repairs. It's how your spirit returns to itself. The story of Leah. Leah was a single mom. Worked 2 jobs. Took care of her kids. Took care of her mother. She was exhausted. But every time someone offered help, she said no. She thought needing rest made her look weak. Until one day, she snapped at her son. Not because he did anything wrong, but because she had nothing left to give. That night, she cried in the shower. Not from guilt, but from relief. Because she finally admitted, I can't keep doing this alone. She started accepting help. Letting go. sleeping more. And what changed wasn't just her energy. It was her compassion for herself. Before we go on, if this message is resonating with the tired part of your soul, take a moment to support this space. Like, subscribe, share. We're building a community where rest is respected, because you are relearning rest. Try this for the next week. Schedule rest. Literally. Put it in your calendar. Call it what it is, sacred time. Not after everything is done, but because you matter, even when nothing is finished. Watch the guilt rise. Then let it pass. Because every time you rest without apology, you reclaim a part of yourself. What rest teaches you? Rest teaches you that your worth is not tied to your output. That your body deserves care. That silence is not wasted. That stillness is wisdom. Rest teaches you boundaries, balance, and how to say, I choose me. Even when the world keeps spinning. Even when others don't understand. Final thought. The break you think you haven't earned is the exact one you need. Not later. Not when things calm down. Not when you're done. Now. Because you are a living being. Not a machine. Not a task. Not a timeline. And your ability to show up every day depends on your willingness to rest when you need to. So take the break. Without guilt. Without shame. Take the break. And trust. It's part of the becoming. Chapter 13. The day you almost gave up. There's a day in every journey when you ask the question no one wants to say out loud. Is this even worth it? You've been trying, fighting, doing the work, and it still feels like nothing is changing. You're not being dramatic. You're not weak. You're just tired. That kind of tired doesn't sleep away. It sits in your bones, in your breath, in your thoughts, and all you want is for something to feel different. The invisible breaking point. Most people don't break when life gets loud. They break in the quiet. They break on a Tuesday morning when no one texts back. They break after hearing "you're so strong" one too many times. They break while washing dishes, because that's when the numbness finally hits. No warning. No big trigger. Just the quiet ache of holding it all for too long. That's the moment we lose people. Not because they're weak, but because no one saw the weight they were carrying. And because sometimes, even the strongest ones need someone to say, hey, you can stop holding the world for a while. The story of Renee. Renee was 6 months into her healing. New routines. Therapy. Cutting ties with what hurt her. She was doing everything right. But one day, she sat in her car and didn't want to get out. She told me later, I wasn't suicidal. I just felt done. Done with trying so hard and still feeling empty. She thought healing would feel like momentum, but it felt like standing still. That day, she texted a friend just 2 words. I'm drowning. And that friend didn't fix anything. She just said, I see you. Stay with me. That text saved her. Because sometimes, the lifeline is not a solution. It's presence. Let's pause for a moment. If you're reading this and thinking, this is me, I want you to know, it's okay to feel done. It's okay to want to quit. It's okay to cry, to break, to stop pretending you're fine. You don't have to keep it all together. But please, don't walk away from yourself. Not today. Not when you've come this far. The psychology of resilience fatigue. We talk a lot about resilience. But what we don't talk about is resilience fatigue. The burnout that comes from constantly bouncing back. The exhaustion from always being the one who gets through it. Resilience without rest becomes a prison. You stop asking for help. You stop feeling. You stop being. That's not strength. That's survival. And you deserve more than survival. The story of Darren. Darren lost his brother suddenly. Grief knocked the wind out of him. Everyone told him how strong he was. But no one asked how he was really doing. He kept going. Kept showing up to work. Kept being fine. Until one night, alone in his apartment, he said out loud, I don't want to do this anymore. And it scared him. Because he didn't mean life. He meant the pretending. So he stopped. He started saying no. Started canceling things. Started sleeping. For a while, that was all he could do. But slowly, life softened. And now, years later, he'll tell you. That moment? The one where I almost gave up? That was the doorway. I just didn't know it yet. Before we go on, if this chapter found you on a hard day, take a breath. You're not alone. There's nothing wrong with you. This feeling is a chapter, not your whole book. And if you believe someone else needs this reminder, share it. It might keep someone here one more day. What to do when you want to quit. Don't isolate. Reach out. Even if it's just one word. Do the smallest thing. Get up. Make tea. Hold your pet. Open the window. Say what's real. You don't have to be positive. You just have to be honest. Rest. Not as a reward, but as a right. Breathe. Longer than you think you need to. These aren't solutions. They're anchors. They remind your nervous system. You are still here. You are still choosing life. Even if it's messy. Final thought. The day you almost gave up. Maybe the day you finally chose you. Not the version that performs. Not the one who always pushes. But the one who needs softness. Stillness. Space. Don't walk away from that person. Because they're not weak. They're just waiting for you to come back. So if today is that day, stay. Not for the future. Not for the outcome. Not even for the hope. Stay, for the quiet promise you once made. I will show up for myself. Even here. Even now. Chapter 14. Becoming the person who keeps showing up. There comes a moment in every journey where something shifts. It's not dramatic. Not loud. But it's real. You wake up and realize. You've become the kind of person who keeps showing up. Not because life got easier. Not because the path cleared. But because you changed. Quietly. Subtly. Completely. The evidence is in the ordinary. You didn't notice it at first. It was in the way you brushed your teeth every morning, without rushing. In the way you paused before reacting. In how you closed your laptop when your body said enough. In how you didn't chase that apology, and slept anyway. That's what growth looks like. It's not a highlight. It's a habit. And over time, it becomes identity. The story of Elias. Elias used to quit everything. Workouts. Relationships. Dreams. Not because he didn't care, but because he didn't believe he could follow through. He told me once, I thought I was broken. Like maybe some people just aren't built for discipline. But that wasn't true. He just hadn't built trust with himself yet. So he made a rule. Show up for 5 minutes. Every day. No matter what. It didn't matter if it was messy. Didn't matter if it was perfect. Just 5 minutes. That was 4 years ago. Now, he leads others. But he still does the same thing. Shows up. Every day. 5 minutes or more. And when I asked him what changed, he smiled and said, I stopped trying to become someone else. I just kept showing up as me. Let's pause for a moment. Maybe you don't see your progress yet. Maybe you feel like nothing's different. But read this slowly. If you've been showing up, imperfectly, inconsistently, quietly, you've already changed. You're not who you were. And that matters more than you know. The psychology of identity formation. In behavioral science, there's a powerful truth. We act based on how we see ourselves. So if you believe you're inconsistent, you'll unconsciously prove it. If you believe you're flaky, you'll keep finding ways to quit. But once you begin to shift that story, once you start to say, I'm someone who stays with it, your brain starts looking for ways to stay. That's not motivation. That's identity. And identity is built through repetition. You didn't just form a habit. You redefined who you are. The story of Tasha. Tasha used to hate mornings. Snoozed her alarm 5 times. Rushed through everything. Started every day already behind. But she wanted peace. Not productivity, just peace. So she started waking up 15 minutes earlier. Lit a candle. Made tea. Wrote 1 sentence in her journal. She did it for a week. Then 2. Then months. Now, she doesn't identify as someone who hates mornings. She's someone who honors the start of her day. Because she became that person, by doing it long enough to believe it. Before we go on, if you're realizing that you've already come further than you thought, take a moment to acknowledge that. Like this message. Share it. There's someone in your circle who doesn't know they've already changed. Show them what's possible. The person you thought you had to become. Maybe you used to think transformation required reinventing yourself. A new job, a new body, a new mindset. But maybe you just needed to return to who you were before the world told you otherwise. Before you believed you weren't enough. Before you learned to quit on yourself. Before the world asked you to prove your worth every second. Showing up is how you remember. How you reclaim. A gentle practice. Try this. Every night before you sleep, ask, how did I show up for myself today? It doesn't have to be big. I drank water. I spoke kindly to myself. I took a walk. I said no. Then write one sentence. I am someone who shows up. Because repetition rewires identity. And identity drives consistency. Final thought. You are becoming the kind of person who keeps showing up. Not because of the results. Not because of the pressure. But because you've made a decision. I will not abandon myself. That decision is everything. You are someone who follows through. Someone who returns. Someone who stays. Even when it's hard. Even when it's quiet. Even when no one else sees. And that is how you rise. Chapter 15. The life you didn't know you were building. You've been showing up. One small act at a time. No grand plans. No big speeches. Just quiet choices, repeated. And without realizing it, you've been building a life. Not the life everyone expected. Not the one you dreamed of in your most ambitious moments. But the life that fits your soul. The life that lets you breathe. The subtle construction of a real life. You didn't wake up and change everything. You just started showing up to the hard conversations. You started saying no to things that drained you. You drank water when you wanted to numb. You made your bed when you wanted to disappear. You thought these choices were small, but they were sacred. Because every time you acted in alignment with who you're becoming, you laid a brick. And now, without realizing it, you're standing inside a structure of self-respect. A life that holds you. The story of Jonah. Jonah used to chase everything. Success. Approval. Stability. He changed jobs every year. Moved cities. Started new projects constantly. But nothing ever felt right. Until he burned out. Again. And this time, something inside said, stop running. Just stay. So he did. He didn't start a new business. Didn't sign up for anything. He just committed to being consistent where he was. Reading. Walking. Sleeping 8 hours. Returning calls. Months passed. Then a year. And one day he looked around and said, this life feels like mine now. Not because it was exciting, but because it was honest. Let's pause for a moment. You might not see the structure you're building right now. You might still feel like you're behind. Like everyone else is doing more, being more, achieving more. But let me tell you something. Those people, they don't live inside your nervous system. They don't know how far you've come. How much you've had to unlearn. How many days you showed up when quitting would have been easier. You do. That's your evidence. The psychology of compounding behavior. In behavioral science, there's a principle called compounding consistency. It means that small actions, when repeated over time, don't just maintain a baseline. They amplify your reality. A 1% shift each day doesn't feel like much. But over a year, you're not just doing more. You're becoming someone new. That's what you've been doing. Brick by brick. Choice by choice. Not for show. For self. The story of Brielle. Brielle didn't love her job. She didn't hate it either. It just wasn't her dream. She used to beat herself up over that. Felt like she was wasting time. Settling. Until she reframed the question. She stopped asking, is this the perfect job? And started asking, Can I build a peaceful life inside this season? She got serious about her morning routine, started cooking for herself, danced in the kitchen with music on loud. And what changed wasn't her job. It was her joy. Now, years later, she's in a different career. But she says the best thing she ever did wasn't chasing her dream. It was learning to show up inside her reality. Before we go on, if this chapter is reminding you that your everyday choices matter, take a second to support this space. Like, subscribe, share. You're not the only one building something beautiful in silence. Let's celebrate that together. Why this life is enough. You may still have goals. Big ones. Bold ones. That's beautiful. But don't let your vision for someday steal the joy of what you've already built. Because peace isn't found in arrival. It's found in rhythm. The rhythm of waking up without dread. Of drinking coffee without urgency. Of laughing without needing a reason. That's not settling. That's arriving in your own skin. One practice for today. Write down 3 things you've done this week that no one saw, but you're proud of. It could be, I didn't argue back. I cleaned 1 drawer. I went for a walk instead of shutting down. Read that list out loud. That's the foundation. That's your life. And it's real. Final thought. One day, you'll look back and realize you were building something all along. Not with perfect steps. Not with lightning breakthroughs. But with presence. With truth. With the courage to keep showing up, even when it didn't feel like it mattered. It mattered. Every moment. Every breath. Every quiet I'm still here. You didn't just survive. You built. And this life that fits your soul, it's yours. Because you earned it. One day at a time. Chapter 16. When you realize you're no longer waiting. Most of us don't know we've been waiting until one day we stop. Waiting to feel ready. Waiting for the perfect plan. Waiting for someone to understand. Waiting for the pain to go away. Waiting for a version of ourselves that finally feels enough. We fill our lives with effort. But underneath it, there's this quiet pause. A hesitation that whispers, not yet. But then something changes. You wake up, do your routine, and you don't second-guess it. You respond to a hard moment, and you don't collapse under it. You look in the mirror, and for once, you don't flinch. You've stopped waiting. You're living. The end of someday. Someday I'll be confident. Someday I'll have peace. Someday I'll be the person who sticks to things. But what if someday isn't a date? What if it's a decision? A quiet choice to stop putting your life on hold. And start being here. Now. As you are. With what you have. The story of Claire. Claire used to start every morning with a sigh. Her to-do list was never done. Her healing felt endless. Her dreams? Always just out of reach. One morning, she was brushing her teeth and looked in the mirror. No makeup. Hair a mess. Tired eyes. And she whispered to herself, I don't want to wait anymore. Not in anger. Not in desperation. Just truth. So she started calling herself a writer. Not when she got published, but when she sat down to write. She started saying, I'm healing. Not I'll be okay someday. She started living her life in real time. And that changed everything. Let's pause for a moment. Are you still waiting? Waiting for clarity. Waiting for the right mood. Waiting for someone to validate you. It's okay. We all do it. But take a breath and ask yourself, what if I just started? Not perfectly. Not permanently. But today. Because waiting doesn't prepare you for life. Living does. The psychology of psychological flexibility. Psychologists call it psychological flexibility. The ability to move forward even when the path isn't clear. It's not about being fearless. It's about not letting fear run the show. It's about saying, yes, I'm scared. Yes, I'm unsure. Yes, I'm tired. And still choosing to act. Still choosing to be present. Still choosing to take one step. That's what ends the waiting. Not certainty, but willingness. The story of Dion. Dion always thought life would begin once he fixed everything. Once his finances were perfect. Once his relationship was stable. Once he was confident in his body. So he kept delaying joy, delaying travel, delaying self-expression. Then his brother passed unexpectedly, and suddenly, later lost all meaning. That week, Dion booked a trip, bought the shoes he'd been eyeing for months, told his partner the truth about what he needed. It wasn't impulsive. It was liberating, because he realized he didn't need to wait for life to be perfect before participating in it. Before we go on, if this chapter woke something up in you, share it. Like it. Send it to someone who's been waiting to feel alive again. You never know what moment will remind them. Their life is not on hold. The practice of no longer waiting. Here's something to try this week. Finish this sentence every morning. Today, I will stop waiting and start. Start what? Start writing. Start speaking up. Start resting. Start forgiving. Start being who you said you'd become. You don't need permission. You need presence. The life you want isn't after the waiting. It's within it. Right here. Right now. In this moment. Final thought. You've spent enough time preparing. Enough time proving. Enough time pausing your spirit until the stars aligned. You don't need a sign. You are the sign. You are the moment. You are the beginning. You are already in the becoming. So breathe deeply. Stand fully. And whisper the sentence that shifts everything. I'm not waiting anymore. And just like that, you've arrived. Chapter 17. The quiet confidence you didn't know you had. It doesn't come with a roar. Not with a spotlight. Not with applause. It shows up quietly. Almost unnoticed. You say what you mean, and don't over-explain. You take up space, without shrinking afterward. You walk into a room, and don't scan for permission. This is confidence. But not the kind you were taught to chase. Not loud. Not flawless. Not performative. This is the kind built slowly, by showing up, again and again, when no one's watching. The confidence that comes from repetition. You didn't force it. You didn't fake it. You just kept doing the hard things. You honored your boundaries. You stood up for your peace. You listened to your gut. You kept your word to yourself. And slowly, without trying to impress anyone, you became someone you trust. That's what confidence is. It's not how you look. It's how you live. The story of Nora. Nora used to stay quiet in meetings. Even when she had the best ideas. She'd write them down. Then watch someone else say them out loud and get credit. She thought confidence would come when she felt ready. It never did. One day, her mentor told her, confidence doesn't come before the action. It comes after. So she started small. She spoke up once. Then again. Then again. Her voice didn't shake any less. But her belief in herself grew. Now, she still feels fear. But she doesn't wait for it to go away anymore. She moves with it. That's what changed. Let's pause for a moment. Where have you been waiting to feel ready? What part of you has been waiting for confidence to arrive before you begin? What if you've already earned it? Not because you're fearless, but because you've kept showing up, even when afraid. That counts. It counts more than you know. The psychology of self-efficacy. In psychology, there's a term called self-efficacy. It means the belief that you can handle what comes next. It's not built by dreaming big. It's built by following through. By making a plan. And taking the first step. Then the second. And when something goes wrong, you keep showing up. That's how belief is formed. Not by perfection, but by consistency. The story of Ty. Ty didn't think of himself as brave. He was introverted. Reserved. Avoided conflict at all costs. But after a bad breakup, he made a rule. I will not abandon myself in conversation. So every time something felt off, he said it. Every time someone crossed a boundary, he called it out. His voice shook. His hands sweat. But he didn't back down. And one night, after saying something hard without apology, he looked in the mirror and smiled. I didn't betray myself today. That was the moment he realized. He didn't need to be louder. He needed to be true. Before we go on, if this chapter is reflecting the quiet strength you're starting to recognize in yourself, take a second. Support the channel. Share it with someone who doesn't know how far they've come. Sometimes, the people with the most courage are the ones who never brag about it. The signs you're becoming confident. You no longer argue with people who misunderstand you. You let go without chasing closure. You choose peace over performance. You protect your energy without guilt. You walk away from what doesn't feel right, without needing to explain why. That's confidence. The real kind. A practice of embodied confidence. Each morning this week, look in the mirror and say, I trust myself today. I speak truthfully. I act respectfully. I move with purpose. You don't have to believe it fully at first, but say it anyway. Because the more often you move like someone who believes, the more you become that person. Final thought. Confidence isn't a costume. It's not something you put on. It's something you build, brick by brick, in the days you don't feel strong. And show up anyway. The more you choose truth over comfort, presence over approval, stillness over performance, the more your life starts to feel like home. And in that home, confidence lives. Quiet, rooted, unshakable, just like you. Chapter 18. The Peace of No Longer Chasing. It starts slowly. You stop explaining yourself to people who never tried to understand. You stop proving your worth to those who only see your usefulness. You stop apologizing for your softness, your pace, your truth. And one day, you notice something strange. You feel lighter. Not because you fixed everything, but because you stopped running from yourself. This is the peace of no longer chasing. Chasing what was never yours. We don't always realize we're chasing something. Validation, belonging, closure, perfection. We run after people who never made space for us. We beg for apologies that won't come. We try to earn love that should have never asked us to suffer. We believe that if we just work harder, try more, give everything, then maybe we'll be enough. But the chase never ends. Until you end it. The story of Lena. Lena spent years trying to win her mother's approval. Perfect grades, perfect posture, polite smiles. But nothing ever felt like enough. Even as an adult, she still caught herself adjusting. Her tone, her values, her boundaries. Until one day, after another strained phone call, she sat in silence and asked herself, what am I chasing, and what would happen if I stopped? She grieved that question, because the answer was simple. If I stop chasing, I'll have to accept the loss. But that acceptance was the beginning of her peace. Now, Lena shows up as herself. Not to be chosen, but to be real. And the version of her that no longer performs? She's finally free. Let's pause for a moment. What are you still chasing? Is it approval? Reputation? Control? Is it someone else's love? Or your old idea of who you should be by now? What would happen if you stopped? What would it look like to stay still and let what's meant for you find you for once? The psychology of letting go. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means you're choosing your energy more wisely. You're withdrawing from places that never made room for your wholeness. You're stepping out of patterns that only led to exhaustion. You're releasing the need to control what was never yours to hold. This isn't loss. It's clarity. And clarity creates peace. The story of Darius. Darius used to chase time, deadlines, ambitions, goals stacked on goals. He couldn't sit still, because stillness made him feel like he was failing. Then he got sick. Not forever, just enough to slow him down. And in those days of rest, he heard a new voice inside. It didn't say, go. It said, be. So he started moving slower, walking instead of rushing, eating with presence, listening without fixing. Now, Darius still works hard, but he no longer races, because he finally trusts that what's meant for him doesn't need to be chased. It will arrive in rhythm, like breath, like peace. Before we go on, If you're feeling the weight of a chase you no longer want to carry, pause here. Support this space if it's helping you find your own rhythm. Like, subscribe, share it with someone still running on empty. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop. The practice of letting it come to you. Try this. For the next 7 days, when you feel the urge to chase, pause. Instead of reacting, ask, is this pulling me closer to myself or away? If it's pulling you away, let it go. Even just for today. Watch what returns. Watch what stays. Watch what you become without the chase. Final thought. You don't have to run anymore. You don't have to prove. Please. Push. You're allowed to rest. You're allowed to exist without explanation. You're allowed to be chosen without chasing. That doesn't mean you don't care. It means you finally believe. You're worthy of what comes to you, without performance. You've built a life. You've rebuilt your trust. And now, you're learning to receive. That's not weakness. That's arrival. That's peace. And it's yours now. Because you stopped running, and finally came home to yourself. Chapter 19. The strength to begin again. You've come so far. And yet, life has a way of circling back. Old triggers return. Old habits resurface. Old doubts whisper from the corners of your progress. And you wonder, why am I here again? It feels like failure. Like starting over. Like all your effort meant nothing. But here's what no one tells you. Beginning again isn't weakness. It's strength in its rawest form. The myth of linear healing. We want healing to be a straight line. Forward motion. Clear milestones. A finish line we can race toward. But real healing isn't linear. It spirals. You revisit the same lessons. Feel the same emotions. Make the same mistakes. But this time, you respond differently. You notice sooner. You speak up faster. You return more gently. That's not regression. That's depth. You're not back at the beginning. You're starting again from a higher place. The story of Anjali. Anjali had been in therapy for 3 years. She had grown in ways she never imagined. Set boundaries. Found her voice. Healed deep wounds. But then her father got sick. And suddenly, all her old patterns came rushing back. Caretaking. Silencing herself. Shrinking. At first, she was angry at herself. I thought I was past this. But her therapist smiled and said, you're not back at square one. You're just meeting this moment with more awareness than before. So Anjali leaned in. She used her tools. She stayed present. It was hard, but it was different. Because this time, she didn't lose herself. And that's what beginning again can look like. Let's pause for a moment. Have you been hard on yourself lately? Have you felt like you should be further? Like you should have known better by now? Pause. Take a breath. You haven't gone backward. You've grown roots. And growth with roots doesn't collapse. It bends. It weathers. It holds. Even when you have to start again. The psychology of renewal. Psychologists call this recommitment. It's the ability to realign with your values after a slip, a setback, or a storm. And here's the truth. People who recommit, again and again, are the ones who make lasting change. Not because they never fall, but because they always return. To their path. To their truth. To themselves. That's not failure. That's resilience. The story of Omar. Omar was sober for 18 months. Then came one night. Lonely. Heavy. Unplanned. He relapsed. The shame was instant. The voices came back. You blew it. You're not strong. You'll never change. But the next morning, he made a different choice. He called his sponsor, told the truth, and showed up to a meeting. That meeting wasn't about the slip. It was about the return. Now, Omar says, that wasn't the day I failed. That was the day I learned how to begin again with grace. Before we go on, if this chapter feels personal, if you're in that space right now, don't hide. Share this. Let someone else know that beginning again doesn't mean you're behind. It means you're brave. The practice of the gentle restart. When you feel off track, don't start with pressure. Start with kindness. Drink a glass of water. Say something true out loud. Open a window. Forgive yesterday. Choose one small action. Then whisper, "We begin again." Do that every time you fall. Every time you slip. Every time you forget who you are. And soon, that act of beginning again becomes your superpower. Final thought. You will fall. You will forget. You will get tired. But you will rise. You will return. You will remember who you are. That's what this whole journey is. Not being perfect. Not never falling. But showing up. Especially when it would be easier not to. So if you need to start again today, start gently. Start slowly. But start. And trust. Every time you do, you're not weak. You're strong enough to begin again. Chapter 20. The quiet victory of being here. You made it. Not because every day was perfect. Not because you never wanted to quit. Not because you figured it all out. You made it because you kept coming back to yourself. Again. And again. And again. This is the quiet victory no one sees. The kind you don't post. The kind no one claps for. The kind that doesn't need a spotlight. But you feel it. In your bones. In your breath. In the way you move through the world now, with steadiness. This is what it means to show up for your life. What you've built. You didn't build a brand new identity. You remembered your original one. You peeled back the noise. The pressure. The shoulds. The old stories that told you you weren't enough until you became someone else. And in their place, you laid something stronger. Habits of presence. Moments of honesty. Acts of self-respect. You created a rhythm. A way of being. A home inside yourself. The story of you. There's no story more powerful than the one you live in now. The one where you finally stopped performing. The one where you showed up tired, but still tried. The one where you told the truth, to yourself first. The one where you paused instead of quitting. The one where you stayed. This is your story now. Not of perfection, but of presence. Not of control, but of trust. Not of being everything to everyone, but being whole to yourself. Let's pause one last time. Before we close, take a deep breath. Let it be full. Let it be slow. And say to yourself, softly, I stayed. That matters. It always has. The psychology of self-alignment. When you align your values with your behavior, your nervous system relaxes. Your mind becomes clearer. Your life begins to feel like yours. That's what this whole journey was about. Not fixing yourself, but returning to the person you were before you learned to abandon yourself. That person was never lost. Just waiting for you to remember. And now, you have. What comes next? You will still have hard days. Still fall out of rhythm. Still forget everything you've learned. But now, you know how to return. You have the tools. You've built the muscle. You know that every moment is a new beginning. Every breath is a doorway back to you. A final practice. As you move forward, try this. At the end of each week, ask, where did I show up fully? Where did I drift from myself? What did I learn in the quiet? What do I want to bring with me? Then write one sentence. I am someone who continues to begin. That's your foundation now. Your practice. Your power. Before we close, if this book has met you in the places no one else could see, let it live in you. Not as a rule book. Not as a goal. But as a voice. A presence. A reminder. You are worthy of your own devotion. And this practice, this art of showing up, it is yours now. Keep it close. Carry it softly. And share it with others who are still trying to remember. Final thought. You don't need a bigger dream. You don't need a louder voice. You don't need a perfect plan. You just need one thing. The willingness to meet yourself. Where you are. To stay. To breathe. To begin again. And to keep showing up. Not someday. Not once it's easier. But now. Always now. Because the quiet victory of being here is enough. And so are you.